You're always going to feel like something's missing if you're hiding from something. So damn the consequences, just be yourself. They're going to talk behind your back if you're authentically yourself or fake. The hard part of a relationship isn't the fighting. It isn't the name calling.
Crista Tedrow, family law attorney, author, and the woman who spent years making everyone else's life better while quietly losing herself. This is her unfiltered story on relationships, self-worth, and what it really takes to stop hiding and finally choose yourself. The Daily Vixen, now on Moonshooters.
I always said yes. I always just pushed down my own emotions. I constantly tried to make things work that didn't work. I tried to pre-anticipate what people needed me to be, and it was exhausting. And I don't think that I really recognized how much I had pushed myself away just to make everyone else's life around me that much better.
Crista Tedrow, welcome to Moonshooters.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
The first question is that you are such a successful lawyer. Like if you're in doing any divorce, you don't want to be confronted by you. I want to be on your side for sure. But the biggest question I have working with you for, I don't know how long have we been working together, but why the Daily Vixen? Why you're doing this?
So I think that I am obviously very passionate about law, but it has to do with not the law itself. I think that I'm more passionate about helping people. And within my role as a lawyer, I think that I'm very pigeonholed into what I can and cannot do to help people. Whereas the Daily Vixen allows for me to give people more personal advice, to share my own story, to let everyone know that no matter where you are in life, that you can always strive for more. That doesn't really coincide with just being a lawyer or even wearing the lawyer hat. There is this certain stigma that you have when you are a lawyer that the Daily Vixen gives me the opportunity to really showcase much more of who I am as a person. And
given that you are a family lawyer, so you've dealt with a lot of women problems. So
yes, obviously I deal with women problems, relationship problems, parent problems, people not knowing how to handle very difficult children, people that need to now help their parents in conservatorship actions, people that just want to plan for the future with estate plans. There's really not a personal problem that coincides with the law that I haven't had to deal with. But I do think that I have a specialized bit of knowledge that I've gained from my work in divorce as it pertains to relationships. I think seeing people's failures helps you really note and pinpoint what makes a successful relationship versus what makes a relationship kind of doomed for divorce.
So what makes a successful relationship?
Open communication. I think that what it boils down to is that people are afraid to talk about either their desires, both out of life, their sexual preferences, what they have always strived for, but maybe have always kind of been put down by their parents or their peers. Financial issues. People are exceedingly not willing to talk about budgets, about savings versus spendings, and about what it means, when you have to crunch down because the economy isn't doing well or someone lost a job. Finances, I would say, is the number one thing that if you do not have the hard conversations with your spouse or your significant other, it will come back to bite you, whether or not it's a year, 5 years, or 25 years down the line. That is a significant key factor in relationship dooms. But that really falls back on you were incapable or unwilling to have the hard conversations, which goes back to communication.
And creating content around this topic is obviously not a money maker to you. Obviously, you're investing a lot of money. So what drives this? Like why? Okay, why do you want to help people?
I think that, I think that I've learned a lot in my life, both academically and in practice, as well as just being able to read a lot of books for my own personal pleasure. I think that I'm a lifelong learner, and not everyone is that. Not everyone wants to read almost 100 books per year. Not everyone wants to consistently learn within their field and outside of it, but I have always been that type of person that wants to. And I see myself doing it within my own life with my family and my friends. And I think that if I am already doing it, why not just put it out there and see what happens?
Right. And what is the Daily Vixen, and why did you come up with that name?
Well, the Daily Vixen is about living your life to the fullest extent and being your most authentic self on a day-to-day basis. So it's really hard for people to be true to themselves in every aspect of their life and to not be afraid to conform to what society says you have to be, what your bosses or your peers say that you have to be, or things that stem from your childhood, things that your parents told you that you should or shouldn't be, or that you're allowed to accomplish, or things that you never would accomplish. And so they hide themselves from, one section or another of the population within their own world. And I want to tell people that you're always going to feel like something's missing if you're hiding from something. So damn the consequences. Just be yourself. It doesn't matter if you're afraid of what someone's going to say, even if they're going to not say it to your face. If you're being your authentic self, or you're being your fake self because you think that that's what they want to hear. If that person was going to talk behind your back, they're going to talk behind your back if you're authentically yourself or fake. So I am just wanting people to realize that there's really no reason to not be yourself. And the reason why I chose the Daily Vixen as the name, because again, it goes back to the daily aspect, and a vixen is a fox. So I want people to not be ashamed to not conform to what a lawyer is supposed to look like, not to conform what a teacher is supposed to look like, not conform to fall into the box of, oh, you're a mom, therefore you can no longer look hot, not to fall into the categories of, you know what, I'm too busy, I don't have time to take care of myself. Well, at the end of the day, you're lying to yourself because there's always time to put yourself first.
Right. And I can totally relate. When I was when I was a school principal, believe it or not, when I was handling my family business, I was a school principal and I was tattooed and stuff like that. And I did not fit that school principal like stereotype. And I faced it, and I noticed that, it's hard. Society put a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, I think that society puts too much pressure on people to fit into cookie cutter boxes. And I don't think that, especially nowadays, that's realistic. I think that you're allowed to wear more than one hat. There's always these jokes out there that, oh, everyone hates lawyers. And I think that that's what I hear when I meet someone for the very first time and they know nothing about me. And so there's already this stigma and this bad juju and vibes between us because you decided that your very first statement to me is everyone hates lawyers. So then automatically I'm defensive. And so because of those boxes, I want people to present themselves first rather than I'm a school principal, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm a podcasting manager, or I, want to start this new venture. I want to be Crista first. I want everyone I meet to be Naja, to be my husband, Jimmy, not to say, oh, 40-year-old men are not supposed to be named Jimmy. You now have to go by James. Well, he's never going to fit in to be James or Jim. He's just Jimmy, and that's okay. And you just have to kind of lean into that. And then everyone in society kind of catches up.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Now, your content targets women primarily. Is that correct?
Yes. I think that being a woman, I think that it's easier to resonate with me as a woman because I can't speak as a man. I don't know the trials and tribulations as well as just the daily pressures of being a man. I can talk about relationships from both ends because I deal with that in my business as a lawyer. But as far as the daily struggles that I have, I'm coming to everyone as a woman. So I wouldn't know how a man would deal with it. I can only tell you how myself, a woman, would deal with it. Do I think that there are applications that apply to everyone? Really just leaning in, being their authentic self? Obviously. But I think that there are other men out there that can give a perspective that's different than mine simply because he grew up a man.
Right. And a lot of people will listen to this and they say, oh, how is that not feminism or something like that? So what's your take on, I'm sure that you hear a lot of people like saying, oh, are you a feminist?
I think that I've been labeled a feminist. I think that people question how I could not possibly be a feminist more often than not. And I think it's boils down to the fact that those individuals may not actually know what feminism stands for today. What feminism standed for in the 1960s, I probably would have stood with those women. But what it has metamorphosized into today is that being a woman puts you in a place higher than being a man simply because you are a woman. And I think that that gives women especially a false sense of empowerment because you should be placed equally or above your peers based on your abilities and not your gender. I think that if you rely on your gender to get you where you want, you're using that as a crutch rather than just really buckling down and striving for it. So do I identify as a feminist? No. Do I think that women have their rightful place in business and their rightful place in politics and every genre across the board? Absolutely. Do I also think that women as a whole may not be able to accomplish on a purely statistical level because they are mothers? They don't continue to stay in the workforce due to periods of unavailability because they're having children, because of maternity, because it very well work within their relationship that they're the ones that takes time off if the children have extracurricular activities or medical appointments. It's simply about the amount of time that an individual can put into their career that gets them the trajectory. So I think that a woman and a man who have put in the same amount of time and work and ethic into their profession, they should be treated equally. But I don't think that an individual, woman or man, because paternity leave also exists in California, if you choose to take off time, that can put you behind simply because you've lost out on the opportunities that you were at home. And that's a choice that everyone makes. You get to make those choices. That's the wonderful part of living in America. You get to choose to stay home because you're not forced to work. You get to choose to go to work because you're not told that you have to have children nowadays. And so it's all about choices. And because of that, everyone is not going to be equal. You have to make your choices, and every choice that you have comes with consequences.
And it's a merit based. So you want okay, you work hard, work on yourself, grow, become that person. It doesn't matter what gender you are.
Correct. I think that, you have to put in the time and the work because that's how you get recognized. That's how you get new opportunities. And putting in all of the time and effort goes a long way. Yes, I'm not going to say that there aren't people who don't just magically have things happen for them. Yeah, that happens. You're going to find the person that makes this viral video on accident and they have instant notoriety. They didn't deserve it because they put in more time than the person who does this day in and day out. It just happened by stance. But it doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl, things like that just happens. However, if you take two people, person A and person B, if person A has worked diligently in their job as a manager for 10 years, they've only taken off 2 weeks vacation per year, they don't ask for holidays off, and then you have person B. They've also been in the same job for 10 years. However, they've had multiple stints of extended periods of time off for medical reasons, for children or otherwise, and they don't have as many clients as the other person does. And then you go to say, who deserves the promotion more? Well, if I don't tell you their genders, we're going to automatically say that person A, the person who has dedicated their life, deserves the promotion. It doesn't change it if that is a man or a woman, because a woman could choose to put their career first And it could be a man nowadays with paternity leave, or single fathers that have no other opportunity but for to stay home with their children. And it's not unfair. It's just realistic.
Yeah. Like if a woman chose to bear children, she's prioritizing that over her career. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, it's not necessarily prioritizing over her career. It's a decision that she makes that says, I want to have children, and she has to understand that that can have an impact on her career. There's only so much time in your day, right?
Yeah.
So if you dedicate 10 hours a day to work, there's going to be a limited amount of time, one, for yourself, for your health, and your family members, whether or not there's children or not. Whereas someone who only works part-time, 4 hours a day, and has obviously ample more time for themselves, their family, and otherwise, you're making those choices. And yes, you could be working at the same place for 10 years, 4 hours a day versus 10 hours a day, and say, I have the same expertise. But simply stated, you don't, because that 6 hours per day that you're not getting over here is going to play an impact in the future. Additionally, the person who has chosen to only put every ounce of their drive into their career at some point more than likely made a decision that either their spouse is going to stay home and take care of the kids, or they're going to forego children altogether. These are choices we have to make. And for anyone to suggest that choices don't matter, it's unrealistic. Every choice that you make matters. If you choose not to eat healthy or to work out, there could be health consequences at the end. If you choose to continue to smoke cigarettes after your doctor says they're impacting your lung health, there's probably going to be consequences. If you choose to consistently call out every Friday because you want to go have fun, there's a possibility that you're going to get looked over for the promotion. If you choose to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children, every single child that you have requires more and more of your time. And that's perfectly fine. And you should dedicate that time to your children. But that means that there's less time for you to do anything else.
You can't have everything in life.
You can't.
Yeah. So I was in Cal State San Bernardino, and we are in California, so we are the very liberal state. And it struck me that we were like sitting in a kind of like in the cafeteria, and one of the people there was a trans. And kind of like, I don't know how it happens in the conversation, but they're saying, we're the up and coming gender. We're going to dominate every other gender. So I haven't known your stance on, the transsexual movement, or whatever we want to call it. But what do you think? How many genders do we have? Are you with the current administration that says we only have two genders?
Well, from a scientific stance, there are only two genders, right? I mean, you have male and female reproductive organs. Obviously, we have always known that there were a very, very minute amount of people who are born with a actual physical disability because they're born with both female and male organs. Under those circumstances, they would be a hermaphrodite because they have to assign a gender to them. But when you think about that, if they have to assign a gender to a person who is born with both, that means that scientists believe that there are still only two genders, and you have to see which of the two organs actually take over as the child develops. So do I think that trans people are a gender? No. I think that that's a sexual orientation or a sexual identity or even a personal identification. But when they go into the doctor's office, per se, if you have female reproductive organs, you need to go and you need to get regular screenings from an OB/GYN because you still have to take care of your personal health. And if you have male reproductive organs, you still have to go and get colostomies, or not colostomies, colon checks. Not quite sure what they are called because apparently I'm a woman and I don't know what they are because we don't have to get them. But that's the thing. you're still going to have to go and see doctors for your specific gender because your biological makeup is going to align in one category or the next, and you have to be able to take care of them. So I don't know that it needs to be as politicized as it has become, and I don't think that it really matters if that's what your preference is, to live your life that way. But to suggest that there's more than two genders really just blurs the lines of what science is about, and more importantly, what it matters and how it matters in your own personal life. Because if you genuinely think that you are a trans woman, that means that you could be forgetting to get colon exams because that doesn't apply to you. And then that means that you could be at a significant higher risk to have colon cancer. And no one should do that to themselves willingly. And vice versa. If you think that you are a trans male, maybe you're foregoing your regular yearly breast exams or your pap smears, and that can have consequences as well. So I don't care what people identify as, that's a personal choice. But I think at the end of the day, they do still need to remember that from a medical standpoint, we've got things that only apply to one or the other.
So let's say you have a child, and this child around teenage age, they came to you and say, "Hey, I want to become a trans." So they want to go do a surgery or a transition. What would be your reaction to that?
So I think that obviously I would have to have had multiple conversations with this hypothetical child of mine. I think that there would have obviously been signs and conversations that come before a conversation that says, hey, I want to have a full gender reassignment surgery. Because I think that if I had missed all of those signs, that would make me a really, really bad parent. But if it did come out of the blue, that would worry me more because then I would question where it's coming from. What type of influences are telling my child that this is a good idea? And I would tell them that we needed to go talk to people, we needed to get research, and we needed to be able to do everything so that they could understand their decision. I wouldn't condone doing anything for a child under the age of 18. You can't get a tattoo before you're 18 without your parents' consent. You aren't allowed to smoke cigarettes until the age of 21 in the state of California. You can't drink alcohol until you're 21 years old. So to suggest that you want to change your entire identity prior to your 18th birthday and prior to your 25th birthday when your prefrontal cortex has been developed, I would have a lot of questions and I would say, hey, therapy is needed. We need to talk to doctors. You need to talk to people who decided that it was a really good idea for themselves to have this surgery and now they are regretting it. I would also have people, my hypothetical child, talk to people who don't have a full-blown reassignment surgery, but live their life as the other sex for a while, because I think that it's very drastic to suggest that the very first course of action is to undergo a very life-altering surgery.
I want to go back to that story of that person who said, we, the transsexual, are the up and coming. We're the new coming. We're going to dominate. And, this could also apply to some, women believe that their sex appeal and their looks could put them in an advantage position over others, for example. And so where is this coming from? And do you believe in it? Do you believe that someone's looks or sex appeal, or like, for example, that person, maybe if they were a man, they will be ignored, but now because they're wearing like a woman, they are standing out. They are getting attention. So do you feel like this is a viable argument, or help us unpack this?
So I think that there are two separate issues in that question. Going back to the original question of this individual saying that the trans movement is going to be the most up and coming gender. I think that that's been propelled by the politicalness of the trans movement. I think that has been overly politicized, meaning that people were pitted against one another if you were conservative or you were liberal. But what I think is really what it really comes down to is that it is a subsect of feminism that I can't get on board with. Again, to suggest that just because you are one gender or next, or you were trans, that you're going to be up and coming and take over the world because of this one element of yourself without taking into consideration your education, your background, your skills, is to suggest that because I'm trans, I'm going to get propelled faster than if I was a female or a male. And that type of ideology is really scary because, again, that is not merit-based. That's not skill-based, and that's not based on any form of ranking to suggest that you deserve it over and above someone who identifies as a heterosexual male or a heterosexual female. And I think that that's really problematic because I don't think that we should tell people if you become trans, automatically you're going to do better than if you were heteronormative. I think that that's kind of pushing society into a place where we are degrading certain professions because it's no longer merit-based. It's just based off of these boxes that we have self-created.
I think it's so important for people to listen to this kind of conversations. And I think you nailed it. Like, this is such especially for the youngsters out there who are just forming their ideas about all of that. And, in the end of the day, social media is an echo chamber. So if you're starting liking a certain line of thought, then you will keep consuming the same. And it's so important for us to, show people the different perspectives. So thank you for that. That was really great way to explain things the way they are, really. So I want to go back to the Daily Vixen and your mission to helping people with personal development. How do you look at a personal development to young women? So how do they think about it? How they should approach this? Like, how can I develop myself?
So I will answer that question in just a second, but I wanted to answer your second question with regards to individuals in general finding that their looks or their sexual desirability is going to make them go farther in life. I think that what it really boils down to is confidence. So if you feel more confident dressing as a woman or identifying as a woman because, like you said, you may get overlooked as a man, but you have very feminine features and you can be a very beautiful looking trans woman, then that might work for that individual because that's where they gain their confidence from. It also identifies if you are a heteronormative male or female. I think that if you can hone in on what makes you confident, whether or not it's your superb intelligence in one area of expertise, or you are societally determined to be beautiful, then you lean into that. But what it boils down to is finding within yourself the thing that makes you confident. Is it getting up on stage to tell jokes? Because other than that, you're kind of shy and you stay away from people. But when you get up on stage, you turn into this bright individual, and then you get off the stage and you shy away, but that's what makes you confident. Is it the person that gets up every single day and does their hair and their makeup and they put on the clothes that they've, prepared for the week because they feel confident when they're really put together? Then they lean into that. If someone is extremely intelligent and they don't connect with people on a regular communication level, then they, figure out something. Maybe they can communicate with people regarding books because they're, so in their head. Or maybe they really only see life in code and zeros and ones. And they can meet people who need them to use codecs to make apps, to make websites. If you lean into what makes you feel confident, if it's looks or otherwise, you're going to go farther. But I think that that's also why people are leaning into this trans movement so much, is because it's the newest thing that instantly makes you unique and different, and right now popular. When I went to high school, I honestly don't think that I knew one person that was trans or that even cross-dressed, but there was also very different social norms at that time where there was a social hierarchy in schools. So you had jocks, you had cheerleaders, you had your honor roll students, you had your chess club players, you had, what they would quote unquote call nerds, you had your kind of social loners. But you had all of these groups that existed in high schools. You can see it in pretty much every high school trope movie where you're going to see how they all interact with one another. You had jocks and cheerleaders and extremely smart academics that were kind of at the top of the social chain. Well, society has said that that's not fair. So they've tried to continuously knock down those specific categories in schools. Well, what happens is that kids specifically, and this goes all the way down to preschool, they're always going to hierarchy themselves no matter what. You're going to be the kid that's super funny. You're going to be the kid that knows how to kick the kickball super far. You're going to be the pretty girl or the cute boy on, the recess. And they're just going to hierarchy each other. And there's always going to be the people who don't specifically fit in. Well, the people who have not specifically fit in have banded together to be able to say, it is our time to shine. And they're going to find all of these new social norms, whether they, identify as trans, whether or not they identify as other up and coming groups. You have gamers nowadays that are extremely wealthy and extremely popular on social media for playing video games and being able to have people watch them. When I went to high school, if you played video games all the time, you weren't popular. And so I think it's just this constant rotation of people figuring out what's popular and what's not. And you're just going to consistently see this. But if you realize that it's constantly that roller coaster, no one's ever going to be up and down just based off of what category they can fit in. And in the long run, you're only going to be successful or popular or well-liked or look like society says that you're beautiful if you put in the hard work. You've got to take care of your health. You've got to work on your communication skills if you are super, super antisocial. You have to try to empower yourself with education if you think that, you want to go far, or you need to lean into something that you're really good at. If you're an athlete, lean into that. If you're really funny, find something you're going to propel in that. But at the end of the day, whether or not you're a man, woman, and what your sexual orientation is, or how you choose to live your daily life, that can't be your entire identity. Me being a woman doesn't really identify who Crista is at all, because that doesn't take into consideration that I love to travel the world, that I own my own law firm, that I have this new venture, the Daily Vixen, that I have a really large friend group all across the world that I prioritize and going to see, that I did choose not to become a mother because there wasn't going to be enough time for me to be the best mother to any children I brought into this world, because I chose to be a business owner. All of those things make me who I am. And that doesn't get told if you just say oh yeah, Crista is successful because she's a woman. No, it takes all of those other things. So I think that yes, sex appeal sells. Yes, being confident sells. But at the end of the day, it's what you do day in and day out that continues to propel you towards success.
I love it. And this is such a good message as well, is that all humans are beautiful. And I think what makes us beautiful is, as you said, the confidence, the belief in ourselves that, if we look at ourselves and we love ourselves, I think that's going to project to everybody. And I totally resonate with that.
And actually, that's a really great way to fall back into the question that you asked me about how I can try to connect with these other young women. Confidence is so important. And I don't think that young women actually are taught enough about how you can gain that confidence. I think that they're told that these are the things that you're supposed to do, and this is the life that you're supposed to lead. And if you don't fall within these specific confines, you can kind of find yourself feeling really lost. And I think that what I'm trying to do with the Daily Vixen is to say, if you put yourself first and you take care of the things that you've been putting aside and you really fix yourself from the center outward, you'll become unstoppable. The problem is that women in general as nurturers will put pretty much everything in the kitchen sink ahead of themselves. So they're going to prioritize taking care of their children, taking care of their husband, being very compliant at work, because that's how they feel like they can take care of people. All the while, they can be falling into depression. They can be continuously pushing down their emotions. They could not be eating correctly because there's no time. They make excuses for not going to the gym because there's always something they could be doing for someone else. And then while you're doing everything for someone else, you feel very good. But once there's not something that you can specifically see, women can find themselves kind of spiraling that say like, oh, I should have done this for them. I should have done this task because I had to watch my boss do it, or whatever the case may be. But they're just consistently chipping away at who they are at the core. And so what I want to do is I want to tap in and say, it's okay to put yourself first. It's okay to say no if the answer is not a hell yes. It is okay to say, society says I have to have children, and if I don't have children, then I'm a bad woman. For me to say, well, what are you doing with your life that would be impacted if you chose to have children? And which of the two would you prefer? And I want to tell them that it's okay to not pursue children if they are really passionate about their career, or they're really passionate about taking care of their family that is already large enough, or the fact that they just don't think that they would physically or psychologically be capable of being the best parent that they want. I just want to let them know that every single choice that you make needs to be yours and yours alone, and not that of society's or your parents or your friends or your family.
Yeah. And this requires a ton of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and a mindset. So the question is, how do we hone these abilities? There's like self-awareness, like how we can mute out all the voices around us and say, okay, well, let me think about it for myself. Let me think about it objectively, and how I handle, like when I know from my experience, my parents always want me get married at a very young age. The same thing they did for my brother. My brother succumbed to that and he got married at a young age. But I've always find it very difficult to say no, or to kind of confront that pressure that they put on you. So that's when emotional intelligence have to play. But how can people hone that skill?
So I think that they have to be willing to put in the work and put in the work daily. And I'm not saying that they have to go to school and get a psychology degree. I'm saying that they have to be willing to say, am I saying yes to this request because I want to? Or am I saying yes to this request because I feel pressured into it, or I feel guilt, or just because I'm such a people pleaser? So you have to really be willing to say, why am I going to say yes to this when I really don't want to? And then you have to ask yourself, what are the consequences of saying yes? What are the consequences of saying no? Okay, so let's give ourselves an example. You get a phone call from a distant relative that says, hey, me and my husband and our 2 kids are coming into town and we couldn't afford to get a hotel. Is it okay for us to stay with you? Well, on face value, this seems maybe like this is an acceptable scenario. Maybe it's not. So let's go through this. I said it was a distant relative. So that means that maybe you have a pre-existing relationship, or maybe they called their mom, who then called your mom because they're cousins. And they said, oh, of course, my son or daughter will have you stay at their house. It won't be a big deal. Granted, mom did not check with you, and you don't remember seeing this person for the last 5 years, and they've not been accommodating when you've come into their town. And so you make these decisions. Okay, what are the consequences of saying yes? Well, the consequences of saying yes, that this family of 4 can come into my house. They're going to completely disrupt any plans that I had pre-existing for this weekend. 2, I now no longer have any sense of personal autonomy because I have to take care of myself, my own family, and now see what a family of 4 wants to eat. I need to go home and make sure that the guest area is set up and think about what children are going to do while they're here. So it takes a lot of consequences on this to say yes. And if the benefits, meaning I would feel guilty because my mom said yes, it's family. People would look down on me if I said no to family. Don't even out. You've already pretty much tipped it into the no category. But just to be safe, you said, okay, what's the consequences of saying no? The consequences of saying no is that this distant family member is going to be mad at me, but I haven't seen or spoken to them in 5 years. So how's that really going to affect my life? Probably not too much. My mom could be mad at me. Well, mom didn't even ask me if I would do this, so she didn't care about my feelings, so I can't really feel about her feelings, and mom didn't offer to take them in herself. So I can't really feel that bad because at the end of the day, mom could have taken them in either. The rest of the family is going to look down on me. Well, the rest of the family is also going to recognize that they haven't been in your life for 5 years and that there's really no pre-existing relationship and thus no responsibility. So when you really think about this, yes, there could be some guilt, but the benefits of saying no significantly outweigh the benefits of saying yes. And so then you say no. And when you do that type of work, you start to see patterns of people taking advantage of you and you being a pushover. And then magically, you start to see these pockets of opportunity. I would have lost an entire weekend and I would have made it work. But now I have an entire weekend that, yes, I might have a dinner opportunity to go out with a client or a new networking colleague, or even just have a romantic evening with my husband. Or, you know what, I'm still going to do that one dinner opportunity, but now because I didn't have to take care of my distant relatives, I'm going to go for that 5-mile hike that I've been putting off because I already pre-planned that I could move everything else around and accommodate this. And you could say, I'm going to put in something that's going to bring me joy and substitute it in. So when you make those decisions, you start to see everything else kind of shift and align because you're putting yourself first and making yourself a priority.
Have you always been like that? Like, have you always been that deep and analytical? Like, how was your teenage life like if we go back into time machine to Crista when she was 16?
So I've always had an uncanny ability to fix other people's problems and to find solutions that they themselves couldn't find for themselves. So that analytical part of my brain has always been there. It's always been able to say, this is how we can get you through this and you'll come out way better. But I didn't apply that to my own life. I always said yes. I always just pushed down my own emotions. I constantly tried to make things work that didn't work. I tried to diffuse situations. I tried to pre-anticipate what people needed me to be, and it was exhausting. And I don't think that I really recognized how much I had pushed myself away just to make everyone else's life around me that much better. And it took me a really, really long time to start to make those self-aware changes. And I think that I still, to this day, have to do the work that says, okay, I don't want to do this. I'm still being asked to do this. Where can I compromise? Is this the time to say no? Is this the time to say yes? Is this the time to double down? Because you can't just constantly live life completely and utterly selfishly, because then you're not going to be a good person. But you are allowed to live your life for yourself and not for others. And so I would say right after I finished law school and I realized just how many directions I was being pulled in and how much everyone required me to do for them when no one was really doing anything for me, I started to make small changes. And over the last 8 to 10 years, I've gotten really, really good at protecting my own peace, at making sure that decisions that I make are beneficial for me today, but more importantly, beneficial for me in the future. So yeah, sometimes I'm going to say yes to things that I don't want to do because there's some beneficial aspect down the future. And sometimes I'm going to say no, even if it's not going to immediately have the best consequences because that's what I needed for myself at that time.
Let's talk about finding love. First of all, from your prior experience, like when you were young, did you struggle with finding love? How was your dating life back when you were younger?
I don't know that I would necessarily struggle in finding people. I think that I found a series of wrong people because they recognized that I was an extreme people pleaser and that I would put them before myself. So I dated a lot of the wrong people because they took advantage of my kindness and my desire to please them. And so in my early dating life from high school up until I would say 2019, I consistently dated the same type of people and in the same type of patterns because I was always willing to put in all of the work to make their lives better, but being able to see back that wasn't always their intentions. Not to suggest that I didn't date good people, but they just weren't willing to give enough to the relationship and to me that it was ever going to be very successful because they weren't willing to meet me halfway.
And so what's the advice? What's the lessons here? If someone's listening and they're a young woman and they're really trying to find love, what would be like your top advice to them?
So I kind of have this analogy that if someone tells you that your relationship is a train wreck and you are fighting and you're fighting and you're fighting to save this tornado of a relationship, you're in the wrong one. And it's not to suggest that relationships are easy because they're not, but they're not hard in the way that my young self believed that they were. And I think that that's what a lot of people who are in relationships that probably should have no longevity struggle with. They're so used to this fight to keep the relationship that they're not realizing that the hard part of a relationship isn't the fighting. It isn't the name calling. It isn't having these blowout fights or these periods of breakups or these breaks. The hard part of a relationship is having the hard conversations. It's having your partner say, "You hurt my feelings," and not getting defensive, actually listening to them. It's really, really developing coping mechanisms for your own reactions to things that come from your past and that don't necessarily have anything to do with your partner. And so my largest bit of advice is that if you're saying your relationship is hard because there are trust issues, there are anger issues, there are financial issues, you're going to continue to fight for these relationships because somewhere deep inside of you, you already know it's destined to fail. So it's easier to fight and fight and fight because you know the outcome. But when you're in a really healthy relationship and you have to have that first aha light bulb moment where just because we had a fight doesn't mean we're breaking up, that's when the real growth in relationship starts. It's when you have that big fight. You can talk through it. You can make changes. And that's the hard part because you have to be raw. You have to be willing to be super emotional, and you have to be willing to take credit for the things that you're doing right in the relationship. But you also have to be willing to take and admit to the faults that you have within the relationship. And that's probably everyone's downfall, is that they don't want to admit that they've possibly ever have any faults.
Yeah.
But that's the hard part. So if you're doing that type of work, you're in a good relationship. The other type of hard, you really need to analyze why you're still in that relationship. And because it's easier to stay because you know the outcome, run.
Yeah. Yeah. I would stay in the comfort zone. And that's really, really hard because when you're in the relationship, you think, especially if you did not have role models and healthy relationships in your past, you don't know what a healthy relationship looked like. So you're thinking, oh, this is a relationship that I have to deal with, and I stay with it and then deal with it, whatever, even if it's abusive, even if it's all of what you described. I think finding that, oh, there is an alternative to that and realize it, but it's hard. How would someone in a relationship realize that there might be a better way?
And I know that this is super hard to admit or to even respond to. The people around you are pretty perceptive. They're also going to be more than likely very protective over you. And so if the people closest to you are telling you, dude, why are you in this relationship? There is usually a reason. Or if you have to have a daily boys' night out or girls' night out to go and complain consistently about your significant other, you already know that the light bulb's gone off because you've chosen to break your bubble of trust and protection with your significant other to not allow for people to be in your business by going out every single week. So there are usually some large tells. Someone has told you that your relationship's a train wreck. They've asked you why you're with that person, and you can't give a concrete, kind of hypocritical reason. You yourself consistently talk bad about your partner. Those are all big signs. So you already know it without knowing it. So if you think that your relationship is a train wreck, if all you're doing is fighting to stay together, but you're not really ever getting to a point where it's good consistently, if you're consistently insecure and non-trusting of your partner, or if everyone is telling you it's a train wreck, these are all signs. And I'm not saying that there aren't certain relationships that in the very beginning, especially with young individuals, that can't metamorphosize into something great. But there's going to be some sort of point where one or the other or both have to do some self-growth in order for the relationship to work. But I think that for myself, one of the things that my husband and I talked about very early on was that we never fight in public and we never talk bad about one another to our friends. Obviously, we're going to say, oh yeah, occasionally she's acting like a bitch, or geez, I can't believe he did X, Y, and Z. Those are pretty mundane things, but we don't talk about any problems.
Details.
Because then if you're consistently speaking negatively about your partner, I don't care what people around you, if your own perception of your partner is that he's bad and that's what you're projecting, that's what people are going to see as well. And so it's always put on a singular front when we're out, have discussions in private that need to be discussed in private, and don't talk bad about one another. And I think that when we agreed on these rules, that it really kind of clicked in my head that none of my exes in the past would have even had enough emotional capacity to even begin to have that conversation. So yeah. I think that that also showed me that this was the alternative.
Yeah, such a great rule. And I apply it direct with Diana too. We always have this... Because at the beginning of our relationship, from my end, I had a best friend, and he's still a friend, but he's a different state now. And I used to, talk about my relationship with him, and I realized that it's really what you said. If you start doing that, he was going to amplify that, and he's not going to try to resolve. He's going to try to make me even, worse in terms of my perception to my relationship. Where when I stopped talking about my relationship to anybody, I feel like we were able to sort things out more efficiently and better. And it forces you to communicate clearer and better. I felt like that helped a lot, and I agree with this 100%.
It's like the game telephone. If you and I are having a conversation, we pretty much understand what we're talking about, and we can identify the issues, and we can come up with a strategy to solve any of our problems. But once we get one person, two people, three people, four people, five people, the story gets distorted, the story gets amplified. And then when the sixth person comes and talks to your partner, it's gotten so blown out of proportion, even though I didn't say that. It has created more problems for us to solve than if we had just had the one-to-one conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's your role model?
I think that I've had multiple role models in my life for a variety of reasons, because I don't think that anyone is super perfect. I know that I'm not. So when I was a kid, I always, idolized my aunt, to suggest that she lived a
Shout out to your aunt.
yes, a perfect life would be an injustice to her. She was an alcoholic and I knew it. But she lived life to the fullest. She didn't fall into social norms, even though in her day and age, for her to not get married and have children is, unheard of. But she really just wanted to, kind of forge her own path. She was super unconventional. She dated married men and she, traveled, and she did a lot of things independently to spite her dad, I believe. But she just had this fire within her that I just always was captivated by. And at her absolute worst, I gave her an ultimatum that said, look, you either completely quit drinking for your own health or I'm out of your life. And that was a really, really hard thing for myself to do. But I think it was also equally important for her to hear, because I think I was the most important person to her in her life. And she snapped out of it. And wow. She was able to get clean and sober. She was able to completely turn her life around, but it never dulled her spark. She still strived to have just this absolutely fulfilled life. But as role models go, she's got some blurry edges, right?
Yeah.
So I can't just fall into those footsteps 100%.
100%.
But I like the idea that she just forged her own path, and that no matter what came her way, she always figured it out. And so she was a really, really strong role model for me. And then when I got to law school, I met a professor who taught my contracts class. His name is Kevin Marshall, and he is now the dean of Laverne Law School. And he has been my mentor from the legal standpoint, basically since day one of contracts. And I just loved his story. He is such an inspirational father and family man. He married me and my husband at our wedding.
Oh,
yeah, he was our officiant. I still stay very connected with him. I ask him about life. And he is probably one of the smartest people I've ever known, but he is never allowed for his work to ever completely overshadow his role as a husband or a father to his three daughters. He is just an absolute inspiration. And, I just learned a lot from his professional stature. As the dean of the law school, he's had to go through a lot, and being able to watch him go through that and how he was able to just kind of strategize and come out on top really, really has always taught me that if there's a will, there's a way. And so he's been a absolute inspiration to me as far as that's concerned.
And in the modern digital world, if I open your Instagram, what do I see in your feed, or if any podcaster that you listen to?
So there's going to be a lot of things about golden retrievers because I'm obsessed with mine.
I have a lot of dog videos too, in my feed.
Yeah,
sure.
Definitely a lot of dog videos. There's also going to be a lot of vacation, inspiration because I absolutely love to travel. I like to at least go to one international location per year, one new U.S. state per year. We're getting pretty low on new states, but we'll
You've
just
done
do
them
some
all.
more repeats. I listen to a couple of podcasts. One of my favorite is the Bitch Bible. She's hilarious. I also really, really like Self-Helpless. They're three comedians that are absolutely hilarious, but they talk about everyday subjects and, you know, how they navigate them. And I really like that. I occasionally will watch the Joe Rogan podcast. I listen to Dr. Rhonda Patrick a lot because I think that she has a lot of information with regards to health that's wonderful. And then more feeds. I mean, you're going to see a lot of my friends. I have friends all around the world that we've met through traveling on cruises, at festivals. Oh, you're also going to probably see a plethora of festival posts for like Subtronics and Wooly and Ali CVT, all of the very, very heavy dubstep artists.
That's cool. That's cool. We have a giant moon here, and this is it's a habit here that I always end the podcast with asking you the ultimate moonshot. You know, what change do you want to see in the world?
I think that I want the people to realize that whatever big machine who's dealing with all the cogs is specifically designed to pit one another against each other. Every single thing that you see nowadays is us versus them. And I can put in any category what is us versus them. It can be political. It can be, you know, societal norms. It can just be where people are from, but it is always us versus them. It's a religious aspect. It is based on gender, your sexuality, men versus women, whatever the case
Politics.
may be. Politics, obviously, Republicans versus conservatives, or conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats. Everyone is falling for it. It even has gone so far as to infiltrate the entertainment entire industry, which specifically was designed to take people out of the real world and all of the horrible things going on in the real world and live in a fantasy land, either through music, art, shows, television, movies, so that you could just for 30 minutes, 3 minutes of a song, 2 hours if it's a movie, get out of all of the world's problems, trials, and tribulations. So my one moonshot would be, I want people to get back to the realization that no matter what any of those little boxes that people check don't matter, because you can connect with them on one level or another. You could find a favorite food. You could talk about sports. You can talk about cars. You can talk about your children's habits. You can talk about how you struggled in college. You can talk about fashion. There is something that you can connect with everyone in this world. And if we stopped with the us versus them mentality, it takes away a lot of people's biases towards one another, all this anger and hatred for one another that really is displaced because just because you're a Republican or a Democrat, you don't know each other, but yet you can hate one another vehemently. Strip yourself of those titles and say, we're both Dodger fans. We both went to a Subtronics concert. We both like the new Adam Sandler movie. That's what everyone should focus on. Let's focus on what makes us alike versus what makes us different.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Crista.
Of course.